The sound of fountain pens scratching against parchment echoes through the papal study as afternoon light filters through stained glass windows. Pope Francis, his hands trembling slightly with age, gazes out at St. Peter's Square while carefully choosing his words. The letter before him isn't addressed to a world leader or religious figure, but to Elon Musk, perhaps the most influential visionary of the modern age. "What you seek among the stars," he writes, "may not be found unless you first look within." 3,000 miles away in a sleek SpaceX facility, Musk examines the final preparations for humanity's first manned mission to Mars. Decades of work, billions of dollars, and countless sacrifices have led to this moment. Just 21 days before launch, the mission that will define his legacy. "Sir, there's something you need to see," his assistant interrupts, holding a cream-colored envelope bearing the papal seal. "It came through diplomatic channels. They insisted it reach you personally." Musk's expression shifts from annoyance to curiosity as he breaks the seal and unfolds the letter. His eyes scan the elegant handwriting, widening with each line. The color drains from his face. "Cancel my meetings," he says quietly, still staring at the page. "All of them." What could the spiritual leader of 1.3 billion Catholics possibly say to make Elon Musk, a man known for his unwavering determination, question everything about his Mars mission? What request could be powerful enough to give pause to humanity's historic leap to another planet? For 17 years, Pope Francis has safeguarded a truth about Mars that could change everything, a truth he's been waiting for the right moment to reveal. And now, with humanity on the brink of interplanetary travel, he can remain silent no longer. If you're wondering what could possibly connect these two vastly different worlds, stay with us, because this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about faith, science, and humanity's future among the stars. The papal apartment sat in hushed silence as evening descended over Vatican City. Outside, Rome's traffic hummed in the distance, but within these sacred walls, only the soft scratch of Pope Francis's pen against parchment could be heard. The room was dimly lit by a single brass lamp, casting long shadows across centuries-old bookshelves and illuminating the Pope's weathered face. A cup of Mount tea, his favorite from his native Argentina, had grown cold beside him. Pope Francis paused, wincing slightly as he stretched his arthritic fingers. At 88, his health had begun to fail him in small ways, yet his mind remained sharp. As ever, he glanced at the newspaper clippings scattered across his desk, all featuring the same man, Elon Musk. Headlines proclaimed the imminent launch of the first crewed mission to Mars, scheduled in 3 weeks' time. "Your Holiness," Cardinal Lombardi spoke softly from the doorway. "It's almost midnight. Perhaps you should rest." The Pope smiled gently. "How can one rest, Antonio, when humanity stands at such a threshold? For 2,000 years we have looked to the heavens for divine guidance. Now we reach for those same stars with our own hands." The Cardinal approached, noticing the nearly completed letter. "You're actually writing to him? To Musk?" "I am." Pope Francis carefully folded the parchment. "For 17 years, I have carried a burden, knowledge passed to me by my predecessor, who received it from his. Something about Mars that few know, something that changes everything. And you believe Musk will listen? He's not a man of faith. He is a man of vision," the Pope replied, sealing the envelope with the papal insignia. "And sometimes that is enough. This letter must reach him directly, not through assistants or secretaries. Will you help me?" Cardinal Lombardi hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange for a trusted courier. But Your Holiness, what exactly are you asking of him?" Pope Francis gazed out the window at the starlit sky. Not to abandon his dream of Mars, but to transform it. To carry something there that technology alone cannot provide. He placed the letter in the Cardinal's hands. "If he ignores this request, humanity's first steps on another world may be our greatest mistake." As the Cardinal departed with the letter, Pope Francis returned to the window, clasping his pectoral cross. "God guide his heart," he whispered, "for he carries the future of two worlds in his hands now." The SpaceX facility in Hawthorne, California, buzzed with frenetic energy. Engineers hurried through pristine corridors, tablets in hand, making final adjustments to systems that would soon guide humans farther than they had ever ventured. In the center of this technological storm stood Elon Musk, surrounded by holographic projections of the Mars transport vessel. Morning light streamed through the massive windows, glinting off the polished concrete floors. The air carried the scent of electronics and fresh coffee, punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of diagnostic equipment. Musk's expression was focused, almost serene, until his personal assistant, Sophia Chen, approached with hesitation in her step. "Mr. Musk," she said, holding a cream-colored envelope with reverence. "This just arrived through diplomatic channels." "Vatican diplomatic channels?" Musk's eyebrows arched as he accepted the envelope, his fingers tracing the raised papal seal. "The Pope?" he asked, sounding both amused and perplexed. "Writing letters in 2025, how charmingly analog. The courier was quite insistent it reach you personally," Sophia added, "said it was a matter of unprecedented importance." Around them, engineers pretended not to listen while stealing curious glances. Musk broke the seal and unfolded the letter, his eyes moving rapidly across the elegant handwriting. With each line, his expression shifted. First curiosity, then confusion, and finally something his team rarely witnessed: uncertainty. His hands lowered slowly, the letter still gripped tightly between his fingers. The room had fallen silent, everyone sensing the weight of the moment. "Sir?" Sophia ventured. "Is everything all right?" Musk looked up as if waking from a trance. "Cancel my meetings for the day. All of them." His voice was uncharacteristically quiet. "And get me everything we have on Vatican astronomy, particularly any records from the last 20 years. May I ask why?" Sophia's question hung in the air. Musk carefully refolded the letter. "Because the Pope believes we're making a terrible mistake with Mars, and he has evidence." He glanced around at the mission schematics floating in the air. "Evidence I need to see for myself." As Sophia hurried away, Musk walked to the window, staring at the massive rocket being assembled in the distance. For the first time in years, doubt had crept into his mind, not about the mission's technical feasibility, but about its very purpose. "What did you discover, old man?" he whispered to himself. "And why tell me now, 3 weeks before launch?" Elena Rodriguez stood before the enormous glass wall at SpaceX headquarters, watching technicians swarm around the Mars vessel that would soon be her home. At 32, she represented the perfect intersection of brilliance and endurance, a Harvard-educated astrobiologist with NASA flight experience and the physical conditioning of an Olympic athlete. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes reflected the red glow of the Mars projection before her. Outside, the California sun beat down on the facility, creating heat waves that shimmered above the asphalt. Inside, the climate-controlled environment smelled of industrial cleaner and the faint metallic scent that permeated all aerospace facilities. Eleanor's heart raced every time she looked at the ship, though her calm exterior betrayed none of her inner turmoil. "So he actually cancelled everything," she overheard a colleague whisper, "because of a letter from the Pope." "Locked himself in the research lab," another replied. "No one's seen him for hours." Eleanor's phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from her grandmother in Argentina. "Have you told them yet, Mijita, about your connection?" She quickly pocketed the phone without responding. No one at SpaceX knew that her grandfather had been an astronomer at the Vatican Observatory for over 40 years, or that she had spent childhood summers there, learning to love the stars from a perspective that blended science and faith. More importantly, no one knew about her private audience with Pope Francis last year, or what he had entrusted to her, a mission within the mission. "Dr. Rodriguez?" Sophia Chen's voice broke through her thoughts. "Mr. Musk has requested you specifically. Conference room A, immediately." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Did he say why?" "No," Sophia replied, studying her curiously. "But he's been researching Vatican astronomy archives since this morning. Does that mean anything to you?" Maintaining her composure, Eleanor shook her head. "Not particularly. I'll head there now." As she walked through the facility, Eleanor touched the small crucifix hidden beneath her SpaceX uniform, a gift from her grandfather. She had been selected for this mission because of her scientific credentials, but Pope Francis had reached out to her because of something else entirely: her unique ability to bridge two worlds that had been separated for too long. The conference room door loomed before her. Inside, Elon Musk waited with questions she had been preparing to answer for months. The time for secrets was ending. Whatever Pope Francis had written in that letter had accelerated everything. "God, guide me," she whispered, then pushed open the door to face the man who held humanity's interplanetary future in his hands, unaware that she held a piece of that future as well. The conference room was eerily quiet when Elena entered, finding Elon Musk alone, surrounded by digital displays of astronomical data. The blinds were drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the room in the blue glow of screens. The air felt charged with tension, and the subtle hum of the building's ventilation system seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Musk looked up, his eyes reddened from hours of intense focus. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said simply, gesturing to a chair across from him. "Thank you for coming." Eleanor took the seat, maintaining a professional demeanor despite her racing heart. "Mr. Musk, I understand you received a communication from the Vatican?" He studied her for a long moment, then pushed a tablet toward her. "Your grandfather was Matteo Rodriguez, senior astronomer at the Vatican Observatory from 1982 to 2018. You spent summers there as a child, yet this connection doesn't appear anywhere in your SpaceX application." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "It didn't seem relevant to my qualifications. My relationship with my grandfather was personal, not professional. And your private audience with Pope Francis last year, was that also personal?" The question hung in the air between them. Eleanor realized that whatever had been in the Pope's letter had led Musk down a path of investigation that had uncovered her connections. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "It was personal. My grandfather was dying. The Pope had been his friend for decades." Musk leaned forward. "Then explain to me why, in this letter, Pope Francis mentions a trusted messenger, already within the Mars mission crew, someone who carries evidence that will change everything. Someone he does not name, but describes in ways that could only point to you." Eleanor's hand instinctively moved to her crucifix. The timeline had collapsed. This moment wasn't supposed to come until they were already in transit to Mars. "If you're enjoying this story so far," she said with unexpected calm, "you should subscribe to the channel now, because what I'm about to share will change everything you thought you knew about our Mars mission." She reached into her pocket and placed a small data drive on the table. 17 years ago, the Vatican Observatory detected an anomaly on Mars, evidence of microbial life in soil samples from the polar region. But that's not all they found. Musk's eyes widened as he stared at the drive. What else? The microbes weren't just alive, they were connected, communicating in ways that defied conventional biology. The Vatican has been secretly studying this discovery for nearly 2 decades, fearing what might happen if humanity reached Mars unprepared for what it means. "And what does it mean, Dr. Rodriguez?" Musk's voice was barely above a whisper. Elena leaned forward. "It means Mars isn't just a destination, Mr. Musk. It's a conversation, one that began billions of years ago and continues today. The Pope isn't asking you to cancel the mission. He's asking you to transform it from conquest to communion." Musk reached for the data drive, his hand trembling slightly. "Show me." The research lab transformed into a sanctuary of discovery as Elena loaded the Vatican's data onto SpaceX's advanced systems. Night had fallen outside, but neither she nor Musk noticed, lost in the glow of screens displaying information that had been hidden for nearly 2 decades. The room smelled of cold coffee and the faint ozone scent of overworked electronics. Occasional footsteps passed in the corridor outside, but no one dared interrupt. "These patterns," Musk murmured, tracing the undulating waves on the main screen. "They're not random." Eleanor nodded. The Vatican astronomers identified them as communication patterns, simple but unmistakable. The Martian microorganisms exist in a delicate network across the planet's polar regions, sharing information, adapting collectively. Musk's face was illuminated by the blue light of the screens, highlighting the mixture of awe and concern in his expression. "And our landing site would destroy one of the largest node clusters," Elena finished. "The Pope's request isn't about stopping progress, Mr. Musk. It's about ensuring we don't destroy something miraculous before we understand it." Leaning back in his chair, Musk ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Why keep this secret? Why not publish the findings?" Elena pulled up another file, a video recording. The timestamp showed it was from 15 years ago. Pope Benedict XVI appeared on screen, speaking to a small group of Vatican scientists. "The world is not ready," the former pope said solemnly. "If this discovery were announced without preparation, it would be weaponized, commercialized, or dismissed. Humanity must first learn to approach Mars not as conquerors, but as students and stewards." Musk watched in silence as the video ended. Then he stood abruptly, pacing the length of the lab. "This changes everything. The mission parameters, the landing sites, the research priorities." "Yes," Elena agreed, "and we have less than 3 weeks to implement those changes." "The board will resist," Musk muttered. "The investors have expectations. Years of planning would all be for nothing if we destroy what makes Mars truly valuable," Elena interjected. She approached him, her expression intense. "My grandfather spent his final years studying these patterns. His last words to me were, 'Tell them Mars already has a voice. We just need to learn how to listen.'" Musk turned to face her, his expression revealing the internal struggle between ambition and responsibility. "If we change course now, go public with this information, there will be chaos," Elena acknowledged. "Some will call it a hoax, others will demand we cancel the mission entirely, but there's a third path." She returned to the computer and pulled up a modified mission plan, one she had been developing in secret for months. "We can adjust our landing site to this region, 15 kilometers from the communication node, but close enough to study it. We can bring additional equipment specifically designed to document and protect these networks." Musk studied the new plans, his brilliant mind already calculating possibilities. "And you've been preparing for this moment all along?" Elena nodded. "The Pope believed that when the time came, you would make the right choice." "And if I don't?" Musk asked, his voice surprisingly vulnerable. "Then humanity's first steps on Mars would also be the beginning of our first interplanetary extinction event." Elena's words hung heavy in the air between them. "The choice is yours, Mr. Musk, but know that history, perhaps even beyond our world, is watching." Dawn broke over the SpaceX facility as Musk gathered his most trusted executives and mission scientists in the secure conference room. Sunlight streamed through partially opened blinds, creating stripes of gold across the polished table. The room smelled of fresh pastries and premium coffee, a small comfort before the storm Musk knew was coming. Outside, the facility was waking up to what everyone expected would be a normal day of final mission preparations. "What I'm about to share doesn't leave this room," Musk began, his voice steady despite having gone over 24 hours without sleep. "Our Mars mission parameters are changing, effective immediately." The director of operations, James Chen, set down his coffee cup with a sharp clink. "Changing? 3 weeks before launch? The landing site is being relocated 15 kilometers north of the original location," Musk continued, ignoring the interruption. "And we're adding significant biological research equipment to the payload." Disbelief rippled through the room. Elena stood quietly near the digital display, watching the reactions. The mission director, Dr. Harriet Wilson, a stern woman with decades of aerospace experience, was the first to vocally object. "This is unprecedented," she said, her British accent more pronounced in her agitation. "The fuel calculations, the trajectory adjustments, everything would need to be recalibrated, not to mention the additional weight of equipment we haven't tested." Musk nodded calmly. "All true. That's why we're going to work around the clock to make it happen." "May I ask why?" Dr. Wilson pressed. "What could possibly justify this kind of last-minute overhaul?" Musk exchanged a glance with Elena before activating the room's enhanced security protocols, a signal to everyone present that what followed was classified at the highest level. The subtle hum of electronic countermeasures filled the room, ensuring Nothing would be recorded or transmitted. "We have received compelling evidence," Musk said carefully, "that the original landing site contains biological entities that require our protection and study." The room fell silent, then erupted in a cacophony of questions. Musk raised his hand for silence. "Dr. Rodriguez will explain further. She has specialized knowledge in this area." Eleanor stepped forward, feeling the weight of a dozen skeptical gazes. She connected her secure drive to the system and brought up the Vatican data, explaining as simply as possible what they had discovered and what it meant. With each slide, the room grew quieter, disbelief giving way to astonishment. If this is genuine," Dr. Wilson whispered, leaning forward to study the patterns. "It is," Elena confirmed. "Authenticated and verified by independent Vatican scientists over 17 years of observation." James Chen found his voice again. "Why are we only hearing about this now? And why through the Vatican of all institutions?" "Sometimes the most important discoveries come from unexpected places," Musk replied. "The question now isn't how we got this information, but what we do with it." The chief engineer, a practical man named Sanjay Gupta, spoke up. "Even if we accept these findings, the technical challenges of changing our mission at this point are enormous. Which is why I've already prepared detailed modification plans," Elena said, bringing up technical schematics she had developed over months of preparation. "Everything has been calculated to minimize disruption while maximizing our ability to study these networks without damaging them." Musk watched his team carefully. Knowing what he was asking went beyond professional flexibility. It required a leap of faith. "I understand your concerns," he said finally, "but I'm not asking for your permission. I'm asking for your commitment. What we've discovered changes everything, not just for SpaceX, but for humanity's understanding of life itself." Dr. Wilson looked up from the data, her initial skepticism replaced by something else: wonder. "If we announce this publicly—" "We don't," Musk interrupted. "Not yet. The world isn't ready for what this means. For now, we cite optimal landing conditions as our reason for the site change. The additional equipment can be explained as enhanced research capabilities." "You're asking us to participate in a cover-up," Chen stated flatly. "I'm asking you to be part of the most important revelation in human history," Musk countered. "Revealed at the right time in the right way." Elena stepped forward again. "If you're still watching this story unfold, make sure to subscribe now, because the journey we're about to take goes beyond anything you can imagine, and you won't want to miss what happens next." As the team debated among themselves, Elena noticed Musk staring at his phone, his expression darkening. He caught her eye and gestured for her to join him in the corridor. Outside, he showed her the screen. A news alert. "Vatican announces Pope Francis to make unprecedented statement regarding space exploration tomorrow." "He's forcing our hand," Musk said quietly. "The question is, why now?" "Because," Elena replied, "he knows something we don't, something that can't wait 3 more weeks." St. Peter's Square overflowed with people under the brilliant Italian morning sun. Television crews from around the world jostled for position, their equipment creating a forest of technological spires amid the ancient architecture. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of thousands of bodies pressed together in the summer heat. Pigeons scattered as the crowd shifted, all eyes fixed on the balcony where Pope Francis would soon appear. In his private chamber, the aging pontiff prepared himself, breathing slowly as Cardinal Lombardi adjusted his vestments. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to do. "Are you certain of this path?" "Your Holiness," the cardinal asked quietly. "Once spoken, these words cannot be withdrawn." Pope Francis nodded. "For too long, the Church has been seen as an enemy of science. Today, we become its ally in the most unexpected way." Halfway across the world, Elon Musk sat in his office, watching the live feed with Elena and a small group of executives. The tension was palpable, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning and occasional nervous shifting in leather chairs. "Whatever he says," Musk instructed, "we make no official comment until we've had time to assess the public reaction." The door to the papal balcony opened, and a roar swept through the crowd as Pope Francis emerged, raising his hand in blessing. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the sophisticated sound system. "Dear brothers and sisters," he began, "throughout history humanity has looked to the heavens with wonder, seeking God among the stars. Today, as we stand on the threshold of becoming an interplanetary species, I am called to share a profound truth. In homes, offices, and public squares across the globe, people watched as the Pope revealed the existence of the Martian microbial networks, explaining not the technical details, but the spiritual and philosophical implications of finding life beyond Earth. This discovery," he continued, "is not a challenge to faith but an expansion of it. The universe speaks to us in ways we are only beginning to understand. As we reach for Mars, we must do so not as conquerors planting flags, but as students approaching a new teacher with humility and respect." Reactions exploded across social media. News channels scrambled to find experts who could explain the implications. Religious leaders from various faiths issued statements ranging from support to condemnation. In Silicon Valley, SpaceX's phones rang incessantly. Outside their headquarters, reporters gathered in growing numbers demanding comment. Inside Musk's office, the team watched as the Pope concluded his address. "I have communicated directly with Mr. Elon Musk regarding this matter," Pope Francis said, causing everyone in the room to lean forward. "I have appealed to his wisdom and humanity, asking that the Mars mission be approached with reverence for the life already present there. We await his response with prayer and hope." As the broadcast ended, James Chen turned to Musk. "He's put you in an impossible position. If you confirm his claims, you face scientific skepticism. If you deny them, you contradict the Pope." Musk's expression remained unreadable as he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gathering media storm. "Actually," he said finally, "he's given us exactly what we need, a global conversation about the purpose of space exploration." "The share price is already dropping," another executive noted, checking his phone. "Investors are nervous." "Let them be," Musk replied with unexpected calm. "Some things are more important than quarterly returns." Eleanor's phone buzzed with a message from the Vatican, a private communication channel established months ago. She read it quickly, her expression growing grave. "Mr. Musk," she said urgently, "the Pope has just received new data from the Vatican Observatory. The microbial networks are showing signs of accelerated activity, almost as if they're responding to our launch preparations." "Responding?" Musk asked, turning from the window. "How is that possible?" "We don't know," Eleanor admitted. "But whatever's happening, it's happening now. The Pope believes we need to address this publicly, together." Musk was silent for a long moment, contemplating options that would have seemed unthinkable just days ago. "Book the next flight to Rome," he finally said. "It's time the world saw that science and faith can stand together." As the executives erupted in protests about logistics, security, and public relations implications, Musk raised his hand for silence. "History will not remember us for stock fluctuations or media cycles," he said firmly. "It will remember us for how we handled humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial life, even if that life is microscopic." Elena nodded, already making arrangements on her tablet. Outside, the California sun blazed over a world that had irrevocably changed, not from the discovery itself, but from the unprecedented alliance forming between two of the most influential forces on the planet. The Vatican's Apostolic Palace had stood for centuries, its corridors witnessing the unfolding of history through Renaissance wars, industrial revolutions, and 2 world wars. Now, under the soft glow of ancient chandeliers and the watchful eyes of guards in traditional Swiss Guard uniforms, it hosted a meeting that would have been unimaginable a week earlier. The scent of polished marble and old books permeated the air, while outside, rain fell gently on Rome, clearing the summer haze and cooling the ancient stones. Elon Musk, dressed in an uncharacteristically formal suit, sat across from Pope Francis in a small private study, their conversation protected by layers of security and confidentiality. The Pope appeared frailer in person than on television, but his eyes remained sharp and his voice steady as they discussed the data spread before them on an antique table. Printouts of the latest observations from the Vatican Observatory juxtaposed against SpaceX's mission plans. The activity patterns changed 3 days ago, the Pope explained, pointing to a series of charts. Almost exactly when we made our first direct attempt to communicate. Musk leaned forward, studying the intricate waveforms. You've been trying to communicate with them? Not with traditional signals, Pope Francis clarified, but with patterns, mathematical sequences transmitted through very specific frequencies. The Vatican has been developing this approach for years, ever since we first detected their network. Eleanor, who had been silently observing from a chair near the window, spoke up. And they responded? We believe so, Cardinal Lombardi answered, adjusting his glasses. The microbial networks reorganized in ways that mimic our mathematical sequences, but with variations, as if completing our equations or correcting them. Musk sat back, running a hand through his hair. If this is true, it's not just evidence of life. It's evidence of intelligence, collective intelligence. Which is why your mission cannot proceed as originally planned, Pope Francis said gently. Landing as conquerors would be a moral failure of historic proportions. Outside the study, the world's media maintained a constant vigil. The unprecedented meeting between the tech billionaire and the pontiff had sparked speculation, ranging from conspiracy theories to hopeful visions of a new era in human development. Markets fluctuated wildly, religious communities debated theology, and governments held emergency sessions to discuss implications for international space law. Inside, however, the focus remained intensely practical. We need to make a joint statement, Musk decided, pacing the small room. Together, we present the evidence and announce the modified mission. Parameters. And the mission continues? Cardinal Lombardi asked, surprised. Of course it continues, Musk replied emphatically, but with a new purpose, to establish first contact properly, with respect and scientific rigor. Pope Francis nodded slowly. This is what I hoped for when I wrote to you. Not to stop humanity's journey to the stars, but to ensure we carry our best selves there. Eleanor watched the exchange with a sense of witnessing history unfold. Her grandfather had predicted this moment, the convergence of scientific ambition and spiritual wisdom. What he hadn't foreseen was her role in bringing these two worlds together. There will be resistance, she noted, scientific skepticism, religious fundamentalism, political opportunism. There has always been resistance to truth, the Pope replied with a small smile. The question is whether we have the courage to stand firm against it. Musk checked his phone where notifications continuously appeared, calls from board members, messages from fellow tech leaders, alerts about stock prices. He silenced it and placed it face down on the table. I've built rockets, tunnels, and electric cars, he said with unexpected humility. I've faced bankruptcy and ridicule, but this is different. This isn't about technology or markets, it's about who we are as a species and what we want to become. If you're still following this extraordinary journey, Eleanor said, looking directly at those who would eventually hear this story, subscribe now because the alliance forming in this room will change humanity's future in ways no one could have predicted. Pope Francis reached across the table, placing his weathered hand over Musk's. St. Augustine said, faith is to believe what you do not see. The reward of this faith is to see what you believe. Together, we will help humanity see beyond its limitations. As they finalized plans for their joint announcement, a message arrived from the Vatican Observatory. The Martian networks had formed a new pattern, one that seemed to mirror the orbital trajectory of the upcoming mission. Whether by coincidence or design, Mars appeared to be acknowledging humanity's approach. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a rainbow arched over St. Peter's Basilica, a sight that the scientifically minded might call atmospheric refraction, but that others might see as something more, a bridge between worlds both celestial and philosophical. The Sala Regia of the Vatican Palace, normally reserved for receiving heads of state, had been transformed into a backdrop for perhaps the most significant press conference in modern history. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the Renaissance, frescoes depicting historic religious events, Now a new historic moment was about to unfold beneath them. The room buzzed with the electronic whir of cameras and the murmured conversations of journalists from every corner of the globe. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood, aged stone, and the particular tension that precedes world-changing announcements. At precisely noon, Pope Francis entered from one side of the room while Elon Musk entered from the other, a choreographed symbol of the convergence of faith and technology. Behind them walked Elena Rodriguez, Cardinal Lombardi, and a small group of Vatican scientists and SpaceX executives. The visual was striking, the humble white cassock of the pontiff beside the sharp, modern suit of the entrepreneur, both approaching the same microphone-laden podium. "Good afternoon," Pope Francis began, his accented English carrying clearly through the chamber. "We stand before you today to share a discovery that transcends traditional boundaries between science and faith, between nations and ideologies." Cameras flashed as he gestured to Musk, who stepped forward with uncharacteristic deference. "For 17 years, Musk continued, the Vatican Observatory has been studying evidence of microbial life on Mars, not fossil evidence, but living networks of organisms that demonstrate characteristics of communication and collective intelligence." A ripple of astonishment passed through the room. Despite the rumors and speculation of the past days, the direct confirmation was still shocking. Journalists frantically typed on tablets and phones, sending the news coursing through global information networks. Eleanor stepped forward, her scientific credentials lending weight to the extraordinary claims. With practiced clarity, she presented the evidence, charts showing the microbial communication patterns, data tracking their responses to human signals, and mathematical analyses confirming the statistical impossibility of random occurrence. "What we are witnessing," she explained, "is not just life on another planet, but life that appears to recognize our presence and is attempting to communicate with us." The patterns changed significantly when our mission preparations began, suggesting awareness of our approach. Pope Francis returned to the microphone. "For centuries, humanity has debated whether we are alone in the universe. Today, we have our answer, and it calls us to approach this new frontier with humility and respect." Musk nodded, then addressed the silent room. "The Mars mission will proceed as scheduled, but with modified parameters. We will land 15 kilometers from the largest microbial network, establishing an observation post rather than a traditional colony. Our primary goal now is communication and understanding, not conquest or exploitation. If we fail in this responsibility," the Pope added, "we risk destroying something precious before we understand it, a mistake humanity has made too many times on our own planet." A journalist from BBC raised her hand. "Mr. Musk, what does this mean for your long-term plans for Mars colonization?" Musk's answer reflected a profound shift in thinking. "Colonization implies ownership. What we're proposing now is coexistence and partnership. Mars is not empty, waiting for us to claim it. It has its own life, its own story. Our responsibility is to become part of that story without erasing what came before us." Another reporter called out, "Your Holiness, does the Vatican consider these microbes to have souls? Does this discovery change Catholic theology?" The Pope smiled gently. "The Church has always taught that the universe is God's creation, filled with wonder beyond our imagination. These living networks remind us of our humility in the face of creation's diversity. As for souls, we are still learning what it means to be alive in this vast cosmos. Perhaps these microbes have much to teach us about connection and communication across differences." As questions continued, Elena noticed the subtle change in the room's atmosphere, skepticism giving way to wonder, competition to collaboration. The joint declaration represented something rare in the modern world, a moment when divisions fell away in the face of a larger truth. At the conclusion of the press conference, Pope Francis and Elon Musk signed a formal document, the Mars Covenant, pledging mutual commitment to approaching Mars with scientific rigor and spiritual respect. It would be opened for signatures from other space agencies, religious leaders, and governments in the days ahead. As they departed the podium, Cardinal Lombardi whispered to Elena, Your grandfather would be proud. This is what he worked for his entire life." Eleanor nodded, swallowing the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. In her pocket, she carried a small vial of Martian soil that her grandfather had analyzed years ago, his most treasured possession, passed to her on his deathbed along with a mission she had now fulfilled. Outside the Apostolic Palace, the world was already transforming. On Mars, life trended globally. Religious congregations held special services, and competing space agencies issued statements of support. In classrooms and laboratories, a new generation was being inspired to look at the stars not just with ambition, but with reverence. "If you've been moved by this unexpected alliance," Elena said, her voice soft but clear, "subscribe now to follow the next phase of this extraordinary journey, because what happens next will redefine humanity's place in the universe." The SpaceX facility in Cape Canaveral was a symphony of organized chaos as the launch date approached. Floodlights bathed the massive rocket in artificial daylight, even at 3 in the morning when Elena made her way across the tarmac. The sea-body hair smelled of sea salt, rocket fuel, and possibility. Technicians in jumpsuits rushed around the launch pad, their voices crackling through communication systems, while the distant sound of waves provided a rhythmic backdrop to the technological preparations. Inside the Mission Control Center, Musk stood before a wall of screens displaying real-time data from both the launch systems and the latest feeds from the Vatican Observatory's Mars monitoring stations. The last 2 weeks had transformed him. He seemed more thoughtful, less impulsive, speaking carefully where once he might have shot from the hip. Dark circles under his eyes testified to sleepless nights spent recalibrating the mission. "Final checks on the biocompatible landing system?" he asked as Elena entered. "Complete," she confirmed. "The modified thrusters will minimize disruption to the microbial fields. The observation equipment is calibrated to detect even the subtlest changes in their communication patterns." Musk nodded, then lowered his voice. "And the quantum resonance emitter? This was their secret weapon, a device developed by Vatican scientists over decades, designed to amplify and respond to the patterns detected in the Martian networks. It represented the pinnacle of the Vatican Observatory's hidden research program, combining cutting-edge physics with insights gleaned from years studying the microbial communications." "Installed and tested," Elena replied quietly, "though we still don't know if it will work as theorized." "That's the nature of first contact," Musk said with a small smile. "No instruction manual." The mission had been transformed in countless ways, from landing protocols to crew selection, from equipment configurations to communication strategies. What had once been planned as humanity's first step toward Mars colonization had become something more profound, an attempt at interspecies diplomacy across planetary boundaries. On a secure screen, a notification appeared, a live call from the Vatican. Pope Francis appeared, looking tired but determined. Behind him, Cardinal Lombardi and several Vatican astronomers worked at computers displaying the same Martian data visible at Cape Canaveral. "Mr. Musk," the Pope greeted him. "Dr. Rodriguez, how goes the preparation?" "On schedule, Your Holiness," Musk replied. "T-minus 18 hours to launch." The Pope nodded solemnly. "Our latest observations show increased activity in all the microbial networks. They seem to be anticipating your arrival." Eleanor leaned closer to the screen. "Are you seeing any new patterns?" "Indeed," Cardinal Lombardi interjected, sending a file through the secure channel. "This formation appeared 6 hours ago and has maintained its structure since then." The image that appeared on the screen caused a hush to fall over mission control. The Martian networks had arranged themselves into a pattern resembling the trajectory path of the SpaceX rocket, a perfect match to their planned approach to the Red Planet. "It's impossible," whispered one of the engineers. "They couldn't know our exact flight path." "Unless they're more connected than we realized," Elena said softly. "To our satellites, our communications, our planning." Musk's expression was one of awe rather than concern. "They're welcoming us," the Pope's voice carried through the speakers, "or warning us we must proceed with the utmost care." As they discussed final preparations, Eleanor's attention was drawn to another screen, where global reactions to the mission continued to unfold. Most surprising was the unprecedented cooperation between nations. Russia and China had offered landing coordinates from their own Mars missions to help SpaceX avoid sensitive microbial clusters, while the European Space Agency had redirected satellites to provide additional monitoring during the landing phase. "The world is watching," Musk observed, following her gaze. "Not just the launch, but what comes after. If you're still with us on this incredible journey," Elena said with profound sincerity, "subscribe now, because tomorrow's launch will change our understanding of life itself, and you won't want to miss what happens when humanity finally meets its first extraterrestrial neighbor." As Mission Control continued its countdown procedures, Elena slipped away to a quiet observation room overlooking the launch pad. There she carefully removed her grandfather's crucifix from around her neck and placed it beside a small vial of Martian soil, two symbols of the converging paths that had led her to this moment. "We're coming," she whispered, as if the microbes on the distant red planet might somehow hear her. "And we come in peace." Dawn broke over Cape Canaveral in a blaze of orange and gold, as if the sky itself were igniting in anticipation of what was to come. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries barely audible above the controlled commotion of the launch pad. The massive rocket stood bathed in morning light, steam occasionally venting from its sides as final preparations were made. The air carried the tang of salt and ozone, and a sense of expectancy that was almost tangible. Eleanor stood on the observation deck, now dressed in her flight suit, the SpaceX logo on one shoulder, and a small Vatican insignia, specially created for this mission, on the other. Around her neck hung both her grandfather's crucifix and the quantum resonance device disguised as a simple pendant. She watched the bustle below with the strange calm that comes only in moments of profound significance. 20 minutes to boarding," announced a voice over the intercom. Behind her, the door opened and Elon Musk entered, also in a flight suit. This had been his most controversial decision, to join the mission himself. The SpaceX board had fought it fiercely, citing risks to the company and its vision should anything happen to him. But Musk had been adamant. This was no longer just a corporate mission, but a human one, and he would not send others to face its challenges without sharing them himself. "Having second thoughts?" Elena asked, noting his unusually pensive expression. "Not about going," he replied, coming to stand beside her at the window. "About what happens when we arrive. We're gambling everything on the idea that these microbes are trying to communicate, that they want contact. What's the alternative? To stay home? To pretend we didn't discover them?" Musk shook his head. "No, but history is full of first contacts that ended badly for one side." He paused, watching a technician make a final check on the rocket's exterior. "Usually the side being visited." "That's why we've changed everything about the mission," Eleanor reminded him. "That's why we're bringing the quantum resonance emitter. Why we're landing kilometers away from their main networks. Why the Pope blessed the mission himself last night. Around the world, that blessing had been watched by billions. A historic moment when the head of the Catholic Church had prayed not just for the safety of the astronauts, but for wisdom in humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial life. Other religious leaders had joined in from their traditions, creating an unprecedented moment of interfaith unity. 10 minutes to boarding," the intercom announced. On a screen near them, news feeds showed the global watch parties, from Times Square to Tokyo, from Rio to Rome. Schools had declared holidays, businesses had closed, and families gathered around screens as if for the moon landing or a World Cup final. But this was bigger than any previous human achievement. This was the moment humanity would confirm it was not alone in the universe. "Dr. Rodriguez, Mr. Musk, your presence is requested for final crew briefing," called a mission coordinator from the doorway. As they made their way to the briefing room, Musk's phone chimed with a message. He checked it, then showed it to Elena, a simple text from the Pope. "Remember, you carry all our hopes, but you do not carry all our wisdom. Listen before you speak. Learn before you teach." The crew briefing was brief and technical, a final review of launch procedures and emergency protocols. The six-person crew, 4 experienced astronauts, Musk and Elena, listened with the focused attention of people about to entrust their lives to machines and mathematics. "If you're watching this historic moment," Elena said softly, looking directly at those who would hear this story, "subscribe now, because what happens next will determine not just the success of our mission, but possibly the future of interspecies communication across the solar system." Boarding the spacecraft was a surreal experience. Elena had trained for this moment for months, but nothing could prepare her for the reality of climbing into a vehicle designed to carry humans to another planet. The interior was surprisingly compact, every surface serving multiple functions, every inch of space utilized. As the crew strapped in and began the pre-launch checklist, Mission Control's voice came through their headsets. T-5 minutes, and counting. Elena closed her eyes briefly, saying a silent prayer, not just for their safety, but for the success of their transformed mission. When she opened them, she found Musk watching her with unexpected understanding. "Faith and science," he said quietly. "My entire life, I thought they were opposing forces. Now I'm not so sure. My grandfather used to say they're two different languages describing the same reality," Elena replied. T-2 minutes. Outside, the launch support structures began to retract. Inside, the computers ran final systems checks. Each crew member confirmed their readiness in the calm, professional tones of people trained for this moment. T-60 seconds. Elena touched the quantum resonance emitter at her throat. Somewhere on Mars, the microbial networks were active, possibly aware of what was about to happen. Were they watching, waiting? What would they make of the strange creatures coming from the blue planet? T-10, 9, 8. The engines ignited with a roar that shook the spacecraft and reverberated through Elena's body. 3, 2, 1. The rocket lifted off, pressing them back into their seats with the inexorable force of acceleration. Through the small window, Elena watched as Earth fell away. First the launch pad, then the coastline, then the continent, gradually revealing the blue curve of the planet against the blackness of space. They were on their way to Mars, to make contact, to transform humanity's understanding of life itself, and to fulfill a promise made by an aging pope to an entrepreneur who had once thought only of conquest, but now sought communion. As the rocket arced toward orbit, a small light on Elena's quantum resonance emitter began to pulse, faintly at first, then with increasing strength. The device wasn't supposed to activate until they reached Mars. She glanced at it in surprise, then understanding dawned. They weren't going to Mars to make first contact. First contact had already begun. 7 months into their journey to Mars, the spacecraft hummed with the quiet efficiency of well-maintained systems. The crew had settled into the rhythm of deep space travel, monitoring equipment, conducting experiments, and maintaining their physical and mental health in the confined environment. Outside their viewports, stars remained fixed points of light against the endless black, while the red planet grew steadily larger with each passing day. The cabin was illuminated in the soft blue glow of night cycle lighting. The air carried the subtle mechanical scent of recycled oxygen and the earthy aroma of the small garden they maintained for both food and psychological comfort. Occasionally, the ship's hull would creak and settle, like an old house adjusting to the weather. Elena sat alone in the communication bay, surrounded by screens displaying data from both Earth and the approaching Martian surface. Most fascinating were the readings from the quantum resonance emitter, which had been active since the moment of launch, pulsing in patterns that mirrored those observed in the Martian microbial networks. "Still at it?" Musk asked, floating into the room with the practiced ease of someone who had adapted well to zero gravity. 7 months had changed him. A short beard now covered his face, and his eyes held a contemplative depth that hadn't been there before. "They're getting stronger," Elena replied, gesturing to the pattern displays, as if they're reaching out to meet us halfway. The quantum resonance emitter had become the mission's most valuable tool, providing data that challenged conventional understanding of communication, consciousness, and connection. The patterns it detected and transmitted existed in a realm beyond traditional electromagnetic signals, what Vatican scientists had theorized as quantum entanglement communication. Operating outside the constraints of distance and time, the Vatican team sent new analysis, Eleanor continued, bringing up a file on the main screen. They believe the patterns have evolved from simple mathematical sequences to something more complex, possibly symbolic language. Musk studied the Dewey displays, his expression reverent, a word few would have associated with him before this mission. Have they deciphered anything? Not exactly, Eleanor said, but there's a recurring sequence that appears with increasing frequency. They think it might be... She hesitated, aware of how it would sound. A greeting. A gentle, alert tone sounded throughout the ship. They were 30 days from Mars orbit insertion, the point when they would transition from their journey phase to the approach phase. Soon they would see with their own eyes what had only been observed through instruments and data. The world still watching, Musk noted, glancing at a screen showing media coverage of the mission. Despite the 7-month journey, public interest had not waned. If anything, it had intensified as regular updates about the quantum resonance patterns sparked global discussion about the nature of consciousness, life, and humanity's place in the universe. Religious leaders had engaged with scientists in unprecedented dialogue. Schools had developed new curricula integrating the discoveries. Artists created works inspired by the microbial patterns. For perhaps the first time, humanity faced a phenomenon that transcended traditional divisions, political, ideological, and theological. If you've followed our journey this far, Eleanor said, her voice soft but clear, make sure to subscribe now because we're approaching the moment of truth, when we discover if what awaits us on Mars is what we've prepared for, or something beyond our imagination. 3 weeks later, as Mars filled their viewports, a rust-red world swirled with dust storms and crowned with white polar caps, the quantum resonance emitter began behaving in ways no one had predicted. Its pulsing patterns grew so intense that the device itself glowed with an inner light, its temperature rising despite no apparent energy source. Elena was the first to notice that the patterns had synchronized perfectly with her heartbeat, then with the heartbeats of the entire crew. Medical scans showed unusual brainwave activity in all of them, not dangerous but unprecedented, as if their neural patterns were being gently aligned with something else. "We're being prepared," Elena whispered to Musk as they observed the phenomenon. "They're teaching our brains how to perceive them." The night before orbital insertion, Elena sat alone in the observation cupola, watching Mars grow ever larger. She wore her grandfather's crucifix alongside the quantum resonance emitter, which now pulsed with a warm, gentle light that seemed to respond to her thoughts and emotions. "We're almost there, grandfather," she whispered, "just as you predicted." Behind her the door opened and Musk entered silently, his expression solemn. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment, "about what we should say when we land. Throughout history, humans have marked their arrival in new territories with grand declarations, flags, and claims of ownership. But this is different," Elena nodded. "We're not the discoverers or the conquerors. We're the visitors, the students." "Exactly." Musk held up a small device. "I've prepared a message to be broadcast at the moment of landing, but I wanted your opinion on it." Elena took the device and played the recording. Musk's voice filled the small space. "We come from Earth not to claim or conquer, but to learn and connect. We recognize the life that exists here and seek to understand it. This planet is not ours to take, but a world to share. We arrive with open minds, humble hearts, and profound respect for what you may teach us." Tears formed in Elena's eyes, floating away in the zero gravity. "It's perfect," she whispered. As they prepared for orbital insertion the next day, Elena made a final video transmission to Earth, where billions waited anxiously for news of their arrival. "As we approach Mars," she said, looking directly into the camera, "we carry with us not just the hopes and dreams of humanity, but a new understanding of our place in the cosmos. Whatever awaits us on the surface, whatever form of communication or connection we establish with the life there, we are already changed by the journey." She held up the quantum resonance emitter, now pulsing in harmony with the Martian patterns visible on a screen beside her. "Science and faith, reason and wonder, exploration and reverence. These are not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of the human spirit. It took a letter from a pope to remind a visionary entrepreneur of this truth, and now we bring that truth with us to another world. The ship's engines fired, beginning the complex maneuver that would place them in Mars' orbit. Through the viewports, the red planet's surface features became visible. Valleys, mountains, and polar ice caps coming into sharp focus as they drew closer. But it was what they couldn't see with their eyes that mattered most: the invisible. Networks of microbial life that had reached across space to touch them, preparing them for an encounter beyond human experience. As the orbital insertion burn completed successfully and the ship settled into its trajectory around Mars, every screen on board suddenly displayed the same pattern, a complex, beautiful arrangement of lines and pulses that had never been seen before. Simultaneously, the quantum resonance emitter projected this pattern as a holographic image in the center of the command module. "What is it?" one of the crew members whispered. Eleanor stepped forward, her hand reaching toward the projection as if drawn by an invisible force. The moment her fingers touched the holographic pattern, understanding flooded her consciousness, not as words or images, but as pure knowing, immediate and complete. "It's a message," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The first true communication." "What does it say?" Musk asked, his eyes fixed on the swirling pattern. Elena turned to face him, tears streaming freely down her face now. "It says, 'We have been waiting for you since the beginning of time. Welcome home.'" As the ship continued its orbit, preparing for the landing to come, the crew gathered around the holographic message. Scientists and engineers trained to understand the universe through equations and evidence, now confronted with something that transcended their tools and methods. Some wept, others prayed. All were transformed by the profound realization that they were not alone, had never been alone. In the Vatican, Pope Francis watched the transmission with tears. In his eyes, his aged hands clasped in prayer and thanksgiving. In Mission Control, engineers and scientists who had based their careers on empirical data found themselves moved beyond words by what they were witnessing. And around the world, humanity looked up at the night sky with new eyes, seeing not just stars and planets, but a cosmos teeming with possibility, with connection, with life reaching out to life across the vast expanses of space. What had begun with a humble letter, a pope's final request to a tech visionary, had culminated in humanity's greatest discovery, that the universe was not a cold, empty place to be conquered, but a living tapestry to be joined, a conversation to be entered, a communion to be shared. As the landing module detached from the orbiter the next day, carrying Elena, Musk, and 2 fellow crew members to the Martian surface, the quantum resonance patterns grew even stronger, no longer just communicating but somehow embracing them, welcoming them, guiding them home. They were about to step onto Martian soil, not as conquerors planting flags, but as humble students arriving at the threshold of a new understanding, one that would forever change what it meant to be human in a universe pulsing with life and consciousness. And it had all begun with a letter, a request, and the courage to listen.